Happy Thursday, everyone. Glad to have you here. So happy to have you here. And was excited to have this conversation. I was going to be talking with Mahesh Guruswamy about his new book, How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It. Unfortunately, he's not here right now, and I'm hoping that all is well with him and that we just have some sort of communication challenge, except here he is. So we will go live with him. Mahesh, welcome. Glad that you're here. I was just
happy to be here.
Tap dancing to see if you were going to show up. So what I'm going to do, everybody, we're going to talk to Mahesh about his new book in just a sec. But I want to do what I normally do. Mahesh, I'm going to put you back in the background for just a minute so you don't have to stand there and wonder while I get us started, and then I'll bring you back up in just a sec, if that's
okay. Awesome.
All right. So welcome, everybody, to another Live with Kevin, another what will eventually be an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. If you're joining us live, so glad that you're here. So glad that you stayed. Make sure that you say hello. Tell us where you're located in the in the comment section of whatever social media platform that you're in. Hope you'll do that. And I just want you to imagine that you're joining us, my guest and I, for a cup of coffee, where if you had a question, comment, or idea, you would offer it or share it. I hope you will do exactly that here throughout. If you do that, we'll have a better conversation, make it a better podcast, make it more effective for you. And so speaking of it being a podcast, if you didn't notice that up over my shoulder, I'm going to break this now to where we will cut this for the podcast itself. So Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. Are you ready for some bad news? As a leader, sometimes you have to deliver bad news. While that's a hard truth and doing it can be hard, it is an important part of our job. And that's why I'm excited to be talking about that today with my guest, who I will introduce to you in just a sec. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could join us live in the future for episodes on your favorite social media platform. And you can find out when those will happen and how you can join us by connecting with us on our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Those aren't the only places that we go live to live stream, but they're the most prevalent ones. You can join us and learn more at remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And if you'll do that, you'll know when we're going live, and then you can join us. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective, a new set of tools in order to create the great results that their teams and organizations need. That's what Flexible Leadership can provide you. You can learn more and order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest now, bring him back in. There he is. I'm going to introduce him, and then we will dive in. My guest today is Mahesh Guruswamy. He is a seasoned product development executive who has been in the software development space for over 20 years. He's managed teams of varying sizes for over a decade. He is currently the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Kickstarter. Before that, he ran project development teams at Mosaic, Kajabi, and Smartsheet. I don't think I said that right the first time. Mahesh caught the writing bug from his favorite author, Stephen King. He started out writing short stories and eventually discovered that long-form writing was a great medium to share information with product development teams. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. All of that resulted in his new book, How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It, A Manager's Guide. He is passionate about mentoring others, especially folks who are especially interested in becoming a people manager and newer managers who are just getting started. Mahesh, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. That was way too kind, Kevin.
Well, I called your mom and got it. So listen, I'm so glad that you're here. I love this book, and we are going to talk about it a little bit. And in the intro, I hinted a little bit as to how it came to be that you, as a product development executive, started to do writing. and we'll talk more about that too. But really, sort of, what gets you to this place? Not just with the book, but you didn't, when you were 8, you didn't want to be. I want to be a product development executive. Sort of like, tell us a little bit about the backstory
Oh,
that leads you
yeah.
to here.
I talk about this a lot, both with my teams and publicly too. Growing up, I would consider myself an average kid, right? So I didn't have any um, big ambitions or any, like my son has a goal. He's 11. He already has goals. He already has like his future planned out. I was not like that at all. I think the thing that activated something in me is after I came to the States to get my master's. I came to the States about 20 some years ago. And when I realized that corporate America values throughput and bias for action and getting stuff done and taking ownership, and that I realized that I had a lot of that in me. So that activated something in me. So when you see success, you kind of double down on it, and that's what I did. I kind of double down, double down, double down, and I think like you mentioned in your introduction about your book, right? It's not so much about following your passion. I say like follow what you're really good at and double down on that. So when I was a developer like 20 years ago, everybody is like, yeah, you're really good at getting stuff done. So I doubled down on that. When I became a manager, the feedback that I got was you're really good at getting people to organize, and you're able to get the most out of people and teams. And I sort of doubled down on that. When I first became an executive, the feedback from my then CEO boss was, you really understand how businesses work and you are able to like grow them or help them grow. Then I kind of double down on that. I think my writing is my passion, is what I would say, but I wouldn't consider writing as something that pays the bills for, per se. Right?
Well, unless this book becomes Atomic Habits, that's probably right.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So I think like finding what I was good at, which is, you know, aligning myself for output, aligning myself for getting stuff done, and getting my teams to do the same thing is what got me here, is what I would say.
I love that. So, you talk at the beginning of the book about the fact that there's a lot of books written about like why we should lead, and a lot of like sort of high end and big picture sorts of things. And
Hmm,
you
hmm.
say that this book is kind of about the messy middle,
That's
uh,
right.
the messy middle of leading. And I said it in the intro that as a leader, we're going to have to deliver
Hmm.
difficult messages that we don't want to necessarily deliver, bad news. We can call it lots of things, and you call it lots of things in the book. I think the first place to start, and it's actually where you start in the book as well, is how do you decide when to deliver it? Because there's a decision that we have to make
Hmm.
about sharing or
Hmm.
withholding,
Hmm.
like and when to share, when to withhold, and how long, and all those sorts of things. I think that's an important decision point. I'm curious from your perspective, what are the flags, what are the triggers for you to say, hey, I can't put this off, I can't ignore this, I need to deliver this message? How do you
Yeah,
go about
yeah.
doing that?
I think it really depends on the situation, but the few kind of tricks that I use, or not like tricks that I use, is, there's like a small part of your brain goes, something is wrong. You should like intervene here. Um, so for the longest time, I would kind of ignore that voice because it's like, things don't seem that bad. Maybe things will recover on their own. Maybe teams will figure out how to get this sort of deadlines like pulled back in, etc. But as I got older, as I got more experience in this role, the reality is, that is the small voice in the back of your head is your intuition, which has kind of seen all these situations play out in the past, and is now giving you the early warning that something might be happening. The approach that I use is raising the temperature slowly. So when a project is behind, for example, that's a really, really good moment for leaders to intervene and find out. Sorry, when it's not going well, when a project is like behind on its timelines, um, is the moment when leaders are expected to intervene and find out what's going on. I almost always kind of raise the temperature slowly. So in the first meeting, I was like, hey team, you committed this to be done last week. We're in the week after. What's going on? And almost always when I use that kind of casual, low temperature poking and prodding, teams will, yeah, this happened, so we have accommodated for that now, and we're back on track. Same goes for people too. If people are not hitting their commitments, first conversation is almost always casual, because people are not infallible. Like, they have personal lives going on. They have, they could be dealing with health issues. They could be dealing with personal problems at home, or could be whatever, right? So in the first conversation, I'm always trying to understand what's going on. The second conversation is slightly higher temperature. Is like, hey, things haven't recovered. What can we do to get this back on track? And the third conversation is almost always the messy bit, which is, okay, this is when you have to use one of these words, right? This is unacceptable, or this is not great, or we have to like recover quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So the key is like increase the temperature slowly is what I would say. And usually it is two buckets of situations. Like, one is projects getting behind, where you have to intervene, and the other one is somebody complaining about one of your people. And almost always, like, managers have this tendency to be very protective of their team, and they should be protective of the team. They should protect them from kind of like whatever like others might say about them. But if a peer or a another individual on a different team, or somebody on your team is complaining about someone, you as a leader has to react to that. You can't ignore it, hoping that the problem would go away. It won't.
Yeah, it's unlikely to go away on its own in that case. You just talked a little bit about, and I love that point. Like, listen to that voice, listen to that intuition, and don't put it on pause and don't ignore it. Right? I think that's really good advice. So now you've started to talk a little bit about this idea of preparing to deliver it, and I love this conversation about what temperature am I going to use, and I'm going to turn up the temperature slowly. I'm going to do that intentionally. Is there ever a time when you don't start at casual, like when you've got to bump up the temperature faster, or you like my wife does on the stove sometimes, like start out on high? Like, is there ever a time that you do that, or what's your advice around that?
I think it really kind of depends on the end outcome or goal you're driving towards. So, for example, if you have, I'm just making a hypothetical example, right? So let's say you're working on a Super Bowl ad. The Super Bowl dates are not going to change, right? So they're
No chance it's
no
going to
no
change.
change. Nobody's going to change the date for you. So, and every day is going to be important as you march towards that date. And even a day or two of delays will impact everything in the pipeline. So those are moments where I would raise the temperature immediately. I think for me, in my role, if we're made a big commitment to a big customer, that is, and if we have tied our marketing events together, then that's a date that we can't miss, right? So we have to like deliver on time. So that's one example where you would like immediately raise the temperature, and your team should know, or you should share with the team why you're raising the temperature immediately, because you can't change the Super Bowl, so you have to like deliver this thing on time. So what can we do to get this back on track? So that's number one.
And hopefully that won't be a surprise to them. Like, they should
That's
know
right.
that date isn't movable, right? And those
That's
sorts of
right.
things. So hopefully, um, because what I love about your point of this whole idea of the temperature is that I want to send the message in a way that I'm engaging the team in the solution.
That's
And
right.
what you're
That's right.
saying here is, I don't have any choice, and hopefully they understand that. They may not love the message, but they at least understand the message.
That's right. That's right. That's right. The other category of situations where I have increased the temperature quickly is ethical HR policy violation type deals, right? So if an employee comes to me and says I've been harassed, then I do have to like react to it very quickly and very appropriately. So situations like those are another categories of things where I expect leaders to immediately like raise the temperature.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly right. So you talk it, there's a chapter. I mean, we've already outlined the fact that you've determined that you like to ride, and that you clearly have some skill in writing. I'm talking with Mahesh Guruswamy, the author of the new book, How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It. So we know that you can write, and you make a comment. Well, it's a chapter really, but you make a comment about the fact that sometimes the best way to deliver the news, good or bad, is in writing. And so I would say for me, that's a yes and, but I'd love for you to talk about the yes part.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Because I think we could have a healthy dialogue about it. And yet I understand the point you're making. So share with us that.
Yeah, it's definitely yes and I'll explain my yes. This is something I learned at Amazon. And Amazon is a very data detail oriented company. So everything that they do is centered around the details of what they're talking about. So in my first status meeting at Amazon, I said, I was reporting that a project is like behind. So I was reporting to my boss that the project is behind. I said the project, so I kind of said it verbally in a meeting that the project is behind. So the next question was, why is it behind? So then I had to
logical. We
right,
shouldn't be surprised to get this
exactly,
response.
exactly. So then I was like, and then I had to like sort of think about it in the moment and say, oh, this is why it's behind. And then they're like, okay, what are you doing about it? So what is a new date? And so for me, it is when you're delivering some of these bad new pieces of messy information, I just encourage people to have a script around it. So if you're delivering a status update, you write the status update down, send it to your boss, and then you like give a voiceover. If you do your writing correctly, then you don't even need a voiceover. You can just tackle the questions that are going to come out of it. And my objective after like my time at Amazon was whenever I deliver information to people which is somewhat controversial or somewhat imperfect, I go for having all the details ready and written down, and then go have the conversation, with people. Having said that, I am by no means I'm perfect, but giving your brain a chance to think through the narrative is important because if we are living in a world where attention spans are minuscule, and we have accidentally trained ourselves to respond and react in sound bites, which is so terrible for the professional world in general, right? Like where there's so much nuance in what everybody does, there's so much missing context and details and all the big decisions people, companies, and governments are making. So I kind of deliberately go the other way. I'm going to like hold on to the critical thinking part of my brain, which is like, okay, you said this statement. Why are you saying this statement? Like, what does it mean? What are the aftermath? What's the next steps? So I encourage people to, which is why like one of the things I write in the book is I don't like slide decks at all, because the surface area of a slide deck is very limited. So you resort to putting bullet points and you provide voiceovers. But what are the chances that you can remember all the notes for yourself in the voiceover? Chances are you won't. So which is why when I do reviews with my team, it's almost always a document. So everybody writes a narrative about what is going on in their world. We pre-read the document, or we read the document in the meeting, and we discuss the comments
Which
left.
is an Amazon approach.
Which is
Correct?
the Amazon approach, yeah.
So you tell another story, and I'm going to take an aside because I think that you share an example that helps you get to the point about the writing that I think is incredibly useful. And it's almost off topic,
Right.
and yet it's incredibly important. You're nodding your head. I think you know where I'm headed, but this isn't a book report. So let me lay this out. Like you shared some information with your team, some really important information with your team. And when you were done, you expected a result that you didn't get, a response that you didn't get. And then you did something really important. You went back and watched the recording of the
That's
Zoom.
right.
And so I just want to tell everybody that, like, for all of the things that people say about, well, I mean, if we have meetings in person, it's better and all that stuff. And of course, there's lots of reasons that can be true. And yet many of our meetings are recorded. And most of us probably at some point in our life took a course on public speaking where video played a huge role in our ability to get better, or at least be aware. And yet we're not doing that. So Mahesh,
Right.
tell us a little bit about, because really what I'm trying to do is raise up your example as something that we have access to and aren't doing. So you want to say more about that, both the
Yeah.
story and then anything you want to add to what I just said?
Well, I think the one big thing that I would add to what you just said, as leaders progress in their careers, the more important their words become. So you might not realize it as a leader, but your team will latch on to every single word you use when you're talking about a specific topic or a specific, or in a specific meeting. And I realized that over time is you have to be very careful and thoughtful about what you say. And I made the mistake of saying the incorrect things or the incomplete things. Actually, the incomplete things are the most common mistakes that managers make, including myself. Is you set out to say X and you say X minus 50%, right? So I think it's important if you want to become a well-rounded leader, go look at your recordings and find out how many times you said the wrong things, how many times you used verbal graffitis like us, etc. You might not think it's a big deal, but it distracts people from the message that you're trying to deliver. And ask people for feedback. The executive team at Kickstarter that I work with is very open in giving feedback. So I ask often, "Hey, how did I do in this meeting?" And they'll give me a scorecard. Well, that was a B plus, that was a B minus, never an A, because A means you're doing it really well and you have to like stop learning, right? So it's always a B minus or a B plus.
Well, and so a B plus you feel pretty good about, but that doesn't mean you're there, right?
That's right.
I,
That's
I
right.
love that. I appreciate you sharing that, and sort of let me take a bit of an aside there. I think the point that you made about the higher we move in an organization,
Mm-hmm.
the more our words matter is a really important point. So those of you that are listening, that's sort of a mental highlight to me. I think of one of the things that I hope that you take from this. Throughout the book, you talk about delivering messages to stakeholders, to your
Mm-hmm.
boss, lots of other things. And yet one of the places where I think everyone, if they say, I've got to deliver bad news, one of the things that comes into our mind is like a performance review, corrective feedback in a situation, whomever that might be, boss or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But usually we're probably thinking of someone that reports to us or is on our
Right.
project team or whatever. So what advice do you have for us around that?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would want to give out is the HR way of doing things is one aspect of this conversation. There's also the human side of this equation that I encourage people to not forget. And what I mean by that is the underlying assumption that I make with anybody that I work with is these are people. They're not robots. They're not numbers in a
That's a
spreadsheet.
really good assumption, Mahesh.
Right? They're real people with ambitions, careers, families, lives, emotions, dreams, aspirations, etc. Right? That's number one. It's going to change the way you approach conversations. Number two is I like to believe, and I could be wrong here, but I like to believe that 99.9% of the professional world is really good at what they do, but they might not be good for the company or for the role that they're in. So when somebody exits my team or I had to like let somebody go, most of the time they're not a good fit for the role or the company they're at. And I share that with them that hey, this doesn't mean that you will not be successful elsewhere. And the professional world is very large, and I like to believe that if you have the education, you have the qualifications, you have the experience, you can be successful elsewhere. So people who I'd like let go from Amazon ended up becoming successful at Google. People who I'd let go from Smartsheet ended up becoming successful at Meta. Like all these things are possible, and I share that with people very openly. And sometimes I even reach back out after the conversation and ask them, hey, can I help out with introductions or whatever. And the last thing I'll say is one of the things that managers accidentally fall into, the trap that they fall into, is convincing themselves to dislike the person who's receiving the poor feedback. And that is a trap that I encourage people not to fall into, because your mind is automatically wired to deliver bad news when you're angry and upset. And I encourage managers and leaders to like fight that temptation, because if you do it that way, then the other person will feel it. And I know in the moment you might not think anything about it, but longer term it might have lasting damages to their confidence, to all the things, right?
If anyone who's listening is a parent,
That's
you've
right,
done
right,
this. You've done it.
right.
And I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I know I did. And no one won in that in that moment.
That's
I
right.
guess in a moment I felt a little bit better, but was a clear message delivered? Was the feedback accepted and applied? No. Did I deliver it in a way that was helpful? No.
Hmm,
I'm
hmm.
with you 100%. I'm so glad that you shared that. You know, there's another thing you talk about in the book. You Most of the time, if you ask people, um, are there two kinds of feedback? They'll say, yep, positive feedback and negative feedback. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that answer. You
Hmm.
say there's two other kinds of feedback. What are they?
So this is when it comes to giving critical feedback. I like to categorize them as technical feedback and adaptive feedback. I kind of pull those terms from one of my favorite leadership books, which is called Leadership on the Line, where they talk about technical changes, technical problems, and adaptive problems. So what I mean by that is sometimes the feedback is straightforward and it has a straightforward way to fix it. So, for example, if I tell you, Kevin, in this report, you did this wrong, the fix is easy, right? You go back and fix a report, and that's it. So that those kinds of feedback, I would categorize them as technical feedback. Adaptive feedback is harder to give because it challenges what makes Kevin Kevin. So, for example, if I tell you you're not inspirational enough, or you're not motivational enough, or you are rude, or the team doesn't respond to you well, or you're not strategic enough, those things like attack the way you operate. It's the way you're built and the way
The way I
what things
see
that you hold
myself or
true.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those kinds of feedback, I encourage people to think hard about whether you want to give that feedback or not directly, because this is often a situation when you have to give critical feedback to your bosses, because that's where this shows up the most. And I encourage, if you're going to give critical feedback to your boss, I encourage you to do it in small doses first to see if your boss will respond to it. Chances are your
Or
boss
how,
might,
or how they will respond.
or how
They're
they'll
going to
respond.
respond, right?
That's
How
right.
they're
That's
going to
right.
respond.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I encourage people to do it during peace times. So when things are calm and things are quiet, I encourage people to try it out with their boss. The flip side of it is, leaders are hired for a skill that they have, and if the feedback you're giving goes attacks that skill, chances are it's not going to go well. So, for example, let's say you're working for a company and the CEO is hired to turn around the company and really really wants to cut costs because that's the way they've been successful. If you go tell them don't cut costs, it's just not going to work. Right? That's the way they are. So you just have to realize that some pieces of feedback are easy to act on, which is technical feedback, but others are harder to act on, which are adaptive feedback.
I think that's a really useful uh, distinction for all of us. And I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that. The other thing I want to take before we start to wrap up, and I ask you a
Mhm.
couple of other final things,
Sure.
um, the very and I hinted at this when I introduced you, that
Mhm.
you are passionate about helping people figure out if they, my words now, if they really want to be managers or leaders or not.
Mhm.
And you close the book with a sort of a series of questions to help people think
Mhm.
about that. And obviously people need to go get a copy of the book. And when they do that, how to deliver bad news and get away with it, you're going to get that bonus as an appendix. But what are a couple things, and for people that are listening, whether it's for themselves, if they're an aspiring leader, or for someone who's leading and they're sort of wondering how did I end up here? What are a couple of sort of key things that people ought to ask themselves?
Yeah, I think the biggest realization for me, which is also in that quiz in the end, is can you define success for yourself internally without needing any external validation? Because one of the things I realized as I grew as a leader, as a manager, the number of times people will tell you you're doing a good job is going to reduce and reduce and reduce and eventually become zero, because your success is tied to the success of the company. So if you're an individual contributor and you're used to being validated through your boss or through your peers, or if everybody's telling you you're doing a good job, and that's how you derive your sort of internal motivation and validation, then you'll have a tough time becoming a manager. So that's one thing that I encourage people to think through is, will you survive without validation for extended periods of time? Because whatever you do as a manager is like a long game. Like you're not doing things for 1 day, 2 day, weeks, months. It's like sometimes years before you find out whether you're successful or not. So that's number one. And number two is, can you comfortably step out of the limelight and give the spotlight to somebody else? Because the success of my organization, success of the tech team at Kickstarter is 100% of the credit goes to the team who works on the products and features and services, etc. So can you step away from the limelight and give the spotlight to somebody else? It's very, very hard for even sometimes experienced professionals to do. So if you find yourself asking for credit or praise often in your current job, then you're going to have a tough time as a leader.
Yeah, I love that second one, Mahesh, because I think everyone who's listening has seen that boss or had that boss
That's
who
right.
couldn't step out of the limelight. And I'm guessing that everyone who has seen or had that boss does not necessarily have a positive feeling about that moment. So we want to, I always say we can learn from any leader, including what not to do.
That's right.
That's what not to do.
That's right.
That's one of those things not to do. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that, or that I didn't ask that you wish I would have?
No, I would want to close by saying that even though management is messy, but I don't want to discourage people from stepping into that role, because it can be incredibly rewarding to win through your teams, because you're not just affecting the company you're at, not just affecting the customers your company is serving, but also the lives and careers of the people on your team, which could be incredibly rewarding if you look at it the right way and understand the messy middle before you get into it.
I absolutely agree 100%. I've got a couple of other questions that I want to ask before we go. And the first one is, so when you're not doing all this great work and delivering all this news, what do you do for fun?
I like to read a lot. That's kind of what I do on the side. Read and write a lot. And also, the being in executive roles is stressful. So the way that I kind of remove the stress is run outside. So I kind of try to get outside and get a good jog in once in a while. So reading, writing, and running is what I would say I like doing.
All right. So if we'd have had a chance to chat ahead, I would have told you this question was coming. So I learned, by the way, I forgot to say this at the beginning, everybody. This conversation that Mahesh and I are having is the 500th episode of this show. And what I learned, usually I tell people this before we start. What I learned, everybody, a long time ago is this next question I'm going to ask. If you've listened a long time, you know what I'm going to ask. Mahesh doesn't know. I learned a long time ago, I'm better off asking this question ahead. So I'm going to ask anyway, because I want to know. But I hope it doesn't put you too much on the spot, Mahesh. I want to know what you're reading these days.
No surprise, I'm reading Stephen King's new book, Never Flinch.
Awesome. So, the reason that I learned a long time ago, sometimes I would ask people and their eyes get wide. They can't remember a title. They want to go look at their Kindle or whatever. I'm so glad that you could go right to it. We will have Never Flinch, the link to that in the show notes, as well as a link to Mahesh's book, How to Deliver Bad News and Get Away with It, A Manager's Guide. And before we go, what is it where do you want to point people? Is there anything you want to tell people about connecting with you? Anything at all that you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, so you can find me on maheshguruswamy.com or on LinkedIn, where I'm pretty active. If you are a leader or an executive and you need additional help or need a sounding board, reach out to me. The contact information is on maheshguruswamy.com.
All right. It's there. We'll have that in the show notes as well. And now, everybody, before we say goodbye, the question I ask all of you every single episode, 500 of them now, is now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? There's plenty of tactical ideas that we've shared in the last 35 minutes. And it's my hope that you don't just say, hey, that's good stuff, and then move on, but rather to take action on at least one of the things that you got here. Because if you do that, this will have been far more valuable for you than it would just because you happened to listen and hopefully enjoy it. It's that question. It's that question of action. It's that question of decision to take action that will make all the difference for you, whether it's this podcast or anything else. Mahesh, thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
So everybody, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you tell someone else, and so they come join us. And if you're not subscribed wherever you're listening to this from, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any future episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We'll see you all next week.